an alley-oop. Drop rhymes like dimes when I drive the hoop. Y'all must tune in if you want the scoop. The Rapcast crew on the numbers review. Hit the old kick drum like an alley-oop. Drop rhymes like dimes when I drive the hoop. You must tune in if you want the scoop. The Rapcast crew on the ones and twos.
Hey, welcome back to the Raptors Weekly Extra podcast. I'm your host, Blake Murphy. I'm joined, as always, by William Liu, and we're both joined this time by actual basketball stuff to talk about because training camp opened Monday with Media Day. The Toronto Raptors took off for Vancouver from there. They had their first practices there Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, ahead of the exhibition opener, the first NBA preseason game when the Golden State Warriors visit the Raptors in Vancouver on Saturday. Will, how's it going, buddy? How excited are you that basketball is kind of officially back?
I'm dying of just off season. It's just it felt way too long. I don't know what it was this year around, but it's great. It's great. Saturday, basketball will be back. We'll be talking about it on the Sunday podcast. I'm sure it'll be a great game, and we get to face the Warriors, man. The first crack the Warriors will have with Kevin Durant in new garb will be against the Raptors, so that'll be very, very exciting.
If the Raptors win that game, do they automatically shoot to the top of the ladder? They should be number one in power rankings. They're the title favorite.
No, but didn't you hear the Celtics got Al Horford, so they're ahead of the Raptors now.
Right. Yeah, Al Horford bigger get than even Kevin Durant.
Huge.
Al Horford and hypothetical superstar to be named later that they'll get at the trade deadline.
You mean Nerlens Noel?
Sure. Sure.
Superstar, quote unquote.
You said you were dying of off season. That's a tough way to go. I just want to apologize off the top for my voice. I'm dying of being a little sick, not sleeping enough, training for a race that I have on Saturday, and then also singing way too much at Chance on Tuesday.
It's a great concert, man. Great concert. Chance is an electric performer, man. It's one of those guys where, like, when you see him live, like, there's more to the performance than any way that he could possibly convey through just an album alone. Just, like, seeing him on stage, interacting with people. I mean, he took a creative route with it this time around. He kind of made it like a rap musical, which is really cool.
Yeah, and I loved Carlos, the lion.
Yeah. Watch out, young fella.
Big fella. Big fella.
Really big fella.
Here's the thing that sucks about the Chance performances Tuesday and Wednesday, though. The Toronto Raptors were out of town. Had they seen Chance perform, I'd be pegging them for 82 wins, 82-0 after watching that concert.
That's the miracle that Chance promised.
That is, your blessing is not on a mixtape. It's on a regular season standings.
If the Raptors go 82-0, we're still losing to LeBron in the East Conference Finals.
That's bold. I think if they go 82-0, I don't know. The NBA might just end.
Hey, that's one record that can't be broken. All right.
82-0?
Yeah.
It can be broken if. No, it can't. I was going to say if two teams tie and have to play an 83rd game, but you play everyone in the regular season. What a stupid hypothetical we're talking about.
Yes.
We don't need to talk hypotheticals anymore. We have basketball back. So Monday was Media Day. I was there. It was a good time. Raptors were in pretty good spirits. I want to ask you first, Will, you were working the desk. I got kind of a feel for all 30 NBA teams. I think 27 of them had their media days on Monday. What was your impression of how the Raptors' day went from afar? Did anything stick out to you at all?
No, not really. I mean, the one thing actually I thought was interesting was maybe I just didn't get to see this, but I didn't hear too much talk about how much muscle watch was happening on with the Toronto Raptors. Like, did anyone ask Terrence Ross if he gained 10 pounds in the offseason or something?
No, the only muscle watch I think was Jared Sullinger. Mike Ganter, the Toronto Sun, had a good piece on Wednesday about Sullinger dealing with his weight and kind of how his attitude has shifted.
Hey, he looked sleek in the pictures and the videos, at least.
Yeah, he looks good, but I don't know how much you can tell from just pictures. And like, I stood next to him and talked to him, but it's also tough to compare because like I never stood next to him and talked to him when he was in Boston, so I don't know what he looked like before. And then, like, I guess the other half is, like, some people were concerned about Kyle Lowry. I didn't really see anything to be concerned
No, he just
with.
cut his hair. That's the thing.
Yeah.
When he cuts it low, he kind of looks like a baby, a scrumptious baby, as I said in the last podcast.
Okay.
But look, Lowry's gonna be fine. That's What did Masai say? I wouldn't bet against Lowry.
Yeah, and here's the
based on
thing
the way
about
he
both.
conditions himself.
Here's the thing about both of those guys. The contract year theory doesn't really hold water statistically, like mathematically, but people very much subscribe to it from afar. And if you are the type of person who believes people try a little harder and are a little more motivated when money's on the line, both those guys are going to be looking for big contracts next offseason. So, the motivation is there financially, if not just like internally to, be the best. And in terms of Kyle Lowry, yeah, I think that internal motivation is always there because Kyle Lowry's probably still mad at himself for like the last shot he missed in Rio.
Oh, definitely. Let me ask you something. Since you were there at Media Day, can you confirm that Bruno looks more swole? I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
He, also Bruno's English has improved a lot.
That's good.
So the thing with Bruno, if people are unaware, is that, over the last 2 years, even in the D League, it's tough to interview him a little bit. Not because he's not like a nice guy and doesn't try to answer, but the English is still coming along. So it's a lot of some reporters who go down and are only with the 905 for a day or whatever will ask him questions like they ask someone else, and like the speed of the questions and the depth of the questions has to be reined in a little bit. But yeah, Monday was the most I've gotten out of him talking to him. He's not going to give you Kyle Lowry sarcasm or Jared Sullinger lengthy answers or anything like that. But the English is coming along, and he did say that, like, he told me that most of his offseason was spent getting in the gym and working out, and he was flexing a little bit and laughing. He also said his mustache is going to be the key to unlocking his game this year. He has like 7 wisps of a mustache.
Oh man, he's got to come to me for grooming tips though, because I got like 8.
He also called it a moustache, which I thought was a fun pronunciation.
English is coming along.
I might have to get Snapchat when I'm just for like down in the D League, providing everyone regular updates on Bruno Caboclo's moustache.
Okay, yeah, no, definitely.
And Bebe said his mustache is still a couple years away. I don't think he was making a 2 years away from being 2 years away joke, but that was pretty funny.
Bebe's jokes.
Yeah. He's a guy who doesn't look particularly swole. But I mean, he looks like he always looks like.
Yeah, as long as his standing reach is still like 9'6", then we're good.
Yeah. When I was on Nate Duncan's podcast a couple weeks ago, he referred to Nogueira as skinny fat, which I thought was.
Yeah, he's definitely got that going on. I know what Nate's what he's saying there, because. Yeah.
Anything else stand out to you, just from like a general perspective? We'll get into a couple specifics momentarily.
I mean, it was weird because you see a lot of just like on media day, there's just excessive hubris coming from every single team. You got Doc Rivers saying he doesn't see a gap between his team and the Warriors.
He needs glasses then.
Yeah, you've got Derrick Rose saying I want to increase my efficiency and I've been studying Kobe film. So just a lot of optimism across the league. But when it comes to the Raptors, it was all very the level-headed sort of conversation coming out of terms of, they have a very clear sense of what they want to accomplish. They have a very clear sense of what has worked in the past. Obviously, a lot of the team is returning. A lot of the team is maturing. So there wasn't anything that sounded crazy to me, and that's really good because media day is usually just a circus, act. It's a dog and pony show, and sometimes that extends more than just like players taking weird pictures and stuff. That sometimes extends to people making promises they can't live up to. The Raptors didn't need to make any of those promises, and it felt like the Raptors were a very self-aware franchise.
We'll talk about the promises they didn't make shortly. You mentioned the continuity. John Schumann of NBA.com, his annual continuity rankings came out, and what that is he tries to estimate the number of, not estimate the number of players, but he ranks the number of players back, and then he estimates the percentage of rotation minutes that is going to be back for different teams. The Raptors rank 5th among playoffs teams and 8th overall, with 11 players coming back, and they are 8th in projected percentage of minutes that are returning. So 76% of minutes this year will be accounted for by guys who were on the team last year, and then Jared Sullinger makes up a bulk of the difference there.
Yeah, that's good.
It is good.
Because it's less sexy than something like the Indiana Pacers, where like, whoa, they added all these dudes and they made all these changes. You don't know how that's going to go down.
Yeah, new pieces need some time to mesh, and like it's great to have new toys, and it's exciting. And from a writing perspective, it gives you more to write about. But functionally, continuity has some value. There's a reason. On one hand, there's a reason why teams don't keep coaches in the exact same core in place for a long time. On the other, there's a reason the Raptors have rolled over the same core, and they've seen some of those benefits. And I don't think they think they're going to take a huge step forward this year if they're being honest. But that continuity is going to help them continue to establish the winning culture they've talked about and help bring along young guys while they're still winning 50-plus games and increasing their depth by internal development. I think all those things are important. But, you mentioned the promises they didn't make, and I just mentioned the step forward they may not take. One of the biggest takeaways, and I think it should have been obvious going in, that I got from Media Day was that the Raptors, you used the term self-aware. I think they're trying not to, put the cart before the horse, I guess. And they're not going to measure themselves this year by a certain winning percentage or number of wins or rank in the Eastern Conference. I wrote a thing on Wednesday morning about how measuring the Raptors' success will have to go beyond win total. And what that basically said is that it's not going to matter at all. Sorry about the voice cracks, guys. I'm struggling here.
Flu Game Podcast.
Yeah. I got basketball tonight too, and that's I don't know if you see my regular game, but my flu game is definitely not going to hold up. But basically, the Raptors, whether they win 45 games or 51 games where I have them pegged, or 56 again, or even 60, as long as they're qualitatively roughly the same, the win total doesn't really matter. They're not going to measure themselves except by the playoffs. And I think that's a reasonable way to approach it. I think what that lets you do is maybe rest DeMarre DeRozan and Kyle Lowry more than you did last year. Tom Haberstroh wrote a great thing at ESPN this week, last Friday, I guess, citing more and more recent studies about how much likelier an injury is on a back-to-back, especially a road back-to-back. So maybe the main guys will get some more rest. DeMarre Carroll, who we're talking about in a bit, maybe gets brought along a little bit slower. Maybe the young guys see a few more minutes. But all those things can happen, and the win total can slide for those reasons or just general regression. And the Raptors still aren't going to be worried or anything because they're measuring themselves by what happens in the postseason.
Yeah, that's good. So, I mean, it does feel weird, though, as compared to previous seasons. Because, like, last year there was a concrete goal.
The first round of the playoffs. Win a playoff.
The first round. And they did that. They came close to not doing that, which would have been catastrophic. But they did
imagine
that.
what we'd be talking about right now had they not.
Imagine if Frank Vogel didn't play Ty Lawson for like 8 minutes in a row in Game 5 to allow that comeback to happen.
Yo, speaking of, this is a divergence, but speaking of playoff past, what is up with Wizards fans still hanging on to the sweep of the Raptors on Twitter? That is the weirdest thing to me.
That is pretty weird. Yeah, I've actually completely gone over that one.
Oh, you have?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah. I don't listen to your podcast.
No, I didn't say anything about it in the podcast. But
I thought
you should listen to the podcast, Blake. Come on.
Just kidding.
We publish everything we publish should be listened to.
Yeah, so is it just Bullets Forever? Is it all Wizards blogs? What's the deal here? Why?
I guess it's probably just Wizards Forever. Wizards Forever. Bullets Forever. Because the other one, truthabout.net, a couple great writers over there, especially Kyle Weedai and what's his name, Connor Dirks. Great writing over there. They're much more self-loathing, which is kind of the state that Wizards fans should be, more than anything else.
Yeah, but there's this weird thing. So for those who don't know what we're talking about, there's this weird thing where the Bullets Forever account always tweets out stuff about how the Raptors got swept by Randy Whitman and the Wizards, which cool, they did, and it was awful. But that was 2 seasons ago now. What? Yeah. And the Raptors made the conference finals last year, and it's not anywhere near as funny as the Warriors blew a 3-1 lead thing. It's old. It's about a series that nobody cared about and didn't really mean anything. It's not even funny. They just tweeted out to tweet it out. It's very weird.
Yeah, a lot of those key players are gone.
I don't get you, Wizards Twitter.
Yeah, Wizards Twitter is a weird place, but there are some good ones out there, man. Truthaboutit.net. Those guys are good guys.
Yeah, Truth About It's awesome. And I'm not disparaging the work at Bullets Forever either. I just don't.
They got great work too. Yeah.
I just don't get the tweeting thing. Anyway, the Wizards can measure themselves with a very tangible goal, like, hey, we got to make the playoffs because we didn't last year because we were bad.
Or hey, maybe if our backcourt stops sniping at each other through the media and then starts blaming the media for starting a controversy.
Yeah. Meanwhile, the best backcourt duo in the Eastern Conference is setting their focus on the playoffs. So they won 56 games last year. I did, as part of this thing I wrote Wednesday, I went back and looked at all the teams since the Raptors joined the NBA who made a jump from roughly 49 wins to roughly 56 wins, and they almost all took a big step back the next year because of what's called regression, and because it's hard to take another jump when you've already taken a jump. And things don't work in a linear fashion like that. So just be aware, and I think the Raptors are very aware of this with some of the quotes that they said on Wednesday at Media Day. The win total doesn't matter here. Where they finish in the East, so long as they have home court, I think, doesn't really matter that much. They are going to expect to win a playoff series, expect to win a second playoff series, and the goal for them, as much as they put anything on it, is to take the next step against Cleveland. And they feel, as much as that series wasn't as close as 6 games would suggest, they feel like they were only 2 games away from the NBA Finals. So that's where their focus is for this year.
Yeah, and that's where it should be. That's where it should be. And the one thing I want to bring out is okay, I think there is probably some regression to the mean happening or expected to happen to the Raptors this upcoming season. But I mean, the other way to look at it is basically this current core with Lowry, DeRozan, Valanciunas, and I guess Patterson and Ross for the last 3 seasons, they've paced pretty much one at a 55 win pace so long as Lowry's been healthy. After the Rudy Gay trade, they wanted a 55 win pace. Last year they won 56 games, so there it is right there. And then in 14-15, that was the one where Lowry was banged up because DeRozan got hurt first, and Lowry overextended himself. They still won 49. So unless one of these guys falls off, which obviously pray to God that doesn't happen because oh man. But as long as Lowry's healthy, the Raptors have pretty much established themselves as a 50-win team as long as Lowry's healthy.
And even if they repeat last year, I've said this a bunch of times now, that's perfectly okay, man. Back-to-back years winning 50-plus games and making a deep playoff run, you put those kind of seasons back-to-back, and I feel
that's building culture.
I know, and I feel like I'm a broken record with this, and maybe it doesn't matter to you right now, but a year down the line when a free agent wants to go somewhere and they look and, this is a team established at the 50 to 55 win level. Oh, they've made the playoffs 4 years in a row. Oh, they've won a playoff series 3 years in a row if it's a couple of years down the line. Once you're established at that level, no one's, I don't think guys are scrambling to jump on a team that made a 1-year jump and, took a step back and they need you to get them back to that level or.
Oh, you mean like the Wizards?
Yeah. I was trying to be subtle about it, yeah. But yeah, those things matter, and those things are important. And when you can hang your hat a couple years down the line on sustained success over a long period, remember that this coming season will be the first time ever the Raptors have made the playoffs in 4 consecutive seasons. So this stuff is important, and you can't always, things take time to develop, and there wasn't a lot of flexibility this past summer. You have to take things as they come to you sometimes when it comes to getting to a championship level. So just repeating as very, very good is sometimes just that. It's very, very good. It's okay if the Raptors run me back 2015-16. I'll pay for that right now. Run it back.
Yeah, exactly. All right.
You mentioned health.
I mentioned health.
What do you want to talk about health? Yeah, surely there wasn't anything concerning from Media Day.
Well, now that you mention it, with this a little bit awkward of a segue, DeMarre Carroll revealed that, or I guess Dwayne Casey revealed that DeMarre Carroll is still not yet 100% from his knee, and that he's took the summer off to rehab. There's no swelling. DeMarre Carroll says what DeMarre Carroll always says, which is I will be 100% soon. And it looks like he probably will be 100% once the regular season rolls around or close to it. And it seems like he's close to it at the moment anyway. But, Blake, are you concerned that DeMarre Carroll is still not 100% with that knee? Because it's starting to become a persistent problem.
It definitely is. But what was encouraging to me is, A, that he took a lot of time off in the offseason to get right, which doesn't sound like a Carroll thing to do. And B, that the team is going to play this really, really slowly in camp and into the season if they need to. And I mentioned earlier how not focusing on a win total or a certain spot in the conference is going to help them take a longer view with things. I think Carroll's a good example of that. And you look at, even if Carroll has a small role to start the year or even sits out time, it's not the end of the world when you have one of Norman Powell or Terrence Ross who is going to be on the fringe of the rotation anyway. You've got some guard depth. You've got some wing depth. You've got a couple guys competing for the final roster spot who could maybe soak up a couple minutes at forward. I'm not worried isn't the right word. I'm glad that if everything's not 100%, they're going to take their damn time getting to 100%.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And look, last season it was weird because he missed time for rest and then ultimately opted for that surgery. And then by all signs, it looks like he rushed it to get back in time for the playoffs and had some key contributions, especially in that Heat series. Carroll's been through a lot, but the guy's a fighter. And as long as the Raptors give him enough time, he's definitely going to be working towards that rehab. This is not going to be a Hito's fatigue situation. Oh God, Hito Turkoglu. But yeah, okay, so if Carroll does miss time though, what's the Raptors' wing rotation look like, especially at small forward?
I think Norman Powell starts at the 2, DeMarre DeRozan slides to the 3, Terrence Ross has a bigger role off the bench than maybe initially expected, or whoever was going to be on the fringe. I think regardless of who was going to be the next man up, Powell would start. Whoever between Powell and Ross was going to be the first wing off the bench, I think Powell would start because that's what they did last year and seemed comfortable with. But yeah, and then they'd roll out pretty much. We saw 60 games of no Carroll last year. We know what it looks like.
Right, but this time around we don't have James Johnson.
Right, but James Johnson was not in the rotation by the end of the year anyway.
Yeah, exactly. It
was Norman Powell starting, Terrence Ross eating the wing minutes off the bench, and then your 2 point guard lineups kind of carrying you from there. I guess the one question is, do you think this takes does Fred VanVleet no longer have the edge on the other guys competing for the final roster spot?
Ultimately, I still believe that the Raptors would be okay without a third point guard for now, until Delon Wright comes back. And what did Delon say he was going to come back for at media day?
So I caught up with Delon on Monday. He said this week sometime he's hoping to get cleared for full range of motion, which would clear him for shooting. But he told me that he's looking at late December, early January, which is a little longer than the initial timeline, and that's before accounting for the fact that he's expecting to go to the D League on a Major League Baseball style rehab stint as well. So we might be. I have in my head now the new year.
Okay. Well, yeah. Look, I still ultimately believe the Raptors can survive without it. The Raptors have enough ball handlers, so to speak. Maybe they're not necessarily quote-unquote point guards, but guys like DeMarre DeRozan, even Norm a little bit, they can handle the ball. They can initiate offense. It's not that hard of an offense to, we're not exactly running, Steve Nash pick and roll all the time, right? We don't, so I think we'll be a little bit all right there.
We do Nash the big man on the pick and roll now, though, as we saw against the Sun Whiteside.
Oh. So, yeah, look, it does worry me a little bit that the Raptors don't have that sort of wing depth. Even if they had an Alonzo G type, or just maybe even a Luke Richard and Mbah-a-Moute, that kind of guy who, isn't that guy you would normally put in the rotation, but it's a solid guy you can put in there to reliably soak up minutes and match some of that physicality. Because one of the things you mentioned is the same thing with Norm, Ross, and DeRozan, is the three of them are a little bit small to play small forward, and especially with Ross and DeRozan, we've already seen them be ineffective in defending opposing small forwards and bigger wings and stuff like that. So,
and you don't want in DeRozan's case, you don't want him wearing down doing that all the time. The best setup for you is when DeRozan can just guard the worst of the two wings.
And then who would guard Norm? Norm would get the 3?
Yeah, unless it's a real power 3 like LeBron. We saw Norm on Dwayne Wade and on Paul George a little bit in the playoffs, and remember, he's got a ridiculous wingspan and he's strong through the lower half. So if he's functionally bigger than the 6'4" he's listed at,
True.
But yeah,
and also Patrick Patterson can also slide down a little bit. We've seen him last year guard threes. I don't know if that's what you want to do all the time though.
Yeah, I don't think you want to do a lot of that, but maybe if an opponent goes small and you just are staying bigger. But I think they're fine. They'll be able to get through it as long as Carroll's healthy in April. Which who knows? I'm not looking forward to another 6 months of like minor DeMarre Carroll updates, but
yeah, it is what it is. Raptors need him. That's why they got him.
Yeah. All right. Any other thoughts on Media Day before we let you go so I can get on to the second segment?
No, man. Just reminded everyone that we will have a Sunday podcast again with myself this time, and we had the podcast come out on Tuesday this week just because we wanted to include Media Day within the proceedings. But this time around, we will have reaction to the first preseason game.
That's exciting.
If Durant struggles, we're probably going to write him off and say the Warriors are a bust. So,
or the Raptors know how to defend the Warriors. The Raptors figured it out.
Look, the Raptors only lost the Warriors by a combined 8 points last year, and one of them they shouldn't have lost because Corey Joseph was called for a phantom offensive, loose ball foul. He called it on the offensive glass. He got that rebound off with 2:02 left in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, we know the conspiracy, man. The NBA wanted them to get 73 wins, and the Raptors were the patsies.
And the NBA wanted the Cavaliers to come back from 3-1. Don't ever forget that.
Because they want to set up this rubber match this year, where it's Cavs and Warriors round 3.
And clearly, those two teams need help from the league to get to that rematch.
Yeah, no, those teams aren't good on their own.
Yeah. All right. So check back Sunday. We'll have something.
Oh, Will. Yeah. Yeah. So I played basketball 3 times last week after not having played for months.
Right.
I don't know if you know this, Will. I'm getting a little old. I'm 30 years old. My knees were not. I'm actually.
You had DeMarre Carroll knees.
So I meant to ask Carroll about not actually, but I meant to ask Carroll what do you do for your knees, man? Like how much ice is too much ice? Not that they're bad, but I'm kind of wondering if playing ball 3 times in a week after not playing for a really long time, while also training for a race, I wonder if maybe that's why I'm sick right now.
Yo, are you playing on concrete?
No, I'm playing in gyms.
Okay, all right, that's better.
Yeah, it's all right. I subbed in for Dan Reynolds from Raptors HQ's team on Sunday.
Right.
They are undefeated with me in the lineup.
Well, there you go.
I'm not saying that Dan's success is only because of me, but
yeah,
that Aaron Kraft. Every team needs that Aaron Kraft.
I was gonna say maybe Dan Reynolds is Rudy Gay and you're Kyle Lowry stepping up, in his absence.
I'm definitely not Kyle Lowry, but no, Aaron Kraft or a poor man's Kirk Heinrich is the right call.
I think you're just Marcus Banks.
No, what? Where are you getting these things? I've told you the player type, and you're just coming up with you're just naming bad players. It's I can at least play a little defense,
Mm.
I think I'm in better shape than Marcus Banks was at the end of his
Oh, definitely. Marcus Banks looked like Kyle Lowry for a while.
Yeah, wow.
I should clarify from the last podcast. It was not Brevin Knight. It was Rasul Butler. That's it. That's all I want to say.
Yeah, and luckily, I looked, Kirk Heinrich got the funky goggles and stuff like that on. I look a little better out there because of the sponsor of this week's podcast, the Athlete Collective. We talked about them last week. Great local Toronto startup. It's manufactured in Scarborough. It is sold out of Toronto. It's premium sportswear, but it's no logos, so you can mix and match with whatever brands or not look like that, try hard who thinks he's sponsored. And then from a value perspective, man, I played in this stuff every day last week, did some yoga in it, ran in it. It's super, super comfortable, lightweight. You can't, there's nothing not great about it. There's no logos. And then the fact that it's designed and manufactured locally is cool. And the best part about that is that, it's sold in Canadian dollars with free shipping within Canada or the US, from Toronto. So, you go on most websites and you look at the price tag and $30 quickly becomes $45 after shipping and exchange rate. Not with the Athletes Collective. And they have 100% satisfaction guaranteed. So if you're unhappy, which you won't be, they stand by it. So what you should do is go to athletescollective.com, and use the promo code Raptors. And if you do that, you'll get 15% off at the checkout on your first order. So do that, support them, support the local company, support us by doing that, athletescollective.com and the promo code Raptors. So thank you to Athletes Collective for sponsoring this edition of the Raptors Weekly Extra podcast. And Will, thank you for coming on this edition of the Raptors Weekly Extra podcast.
I'll be back next week.
Maybe. I might replace you next week. We'll see.
Okay, all right, never mind.
But I got some guests lined up for the preseason. I don't know how I'm going to work it all out yet.
All right.
I'm this big time, man.
I'll be here if you need me.
Oh, by the way, the young guys on the team all refer to Norman Powell as big time now.
He is
funny.
big time, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He doesn't like it.
Well, play better.
Him and Delon have like this mini Kyle and DeMarre thing going on. It's pretty funny.
That's good. I'm prepared for the next generation because I feel like Delon, just because of who's playing ahead of him at point guard and how deep the Raptors are, he doesn't get his chance to shine. But Delon's game is really far along. He's really good.
The nice thing so one of my worries with his shoulder injury was that he had put on weight pretty quickly at the end of the season before Summer League, and I was worried that maybe that would slow. But he looked good, man. He looked exactly like he looked in Vegas. So if anyone was worried about some atrophy or whatever. No, he's still looking like he's put on that weight, and he's going to be cleared for range of motion stuff soon. So that's all good things, man, except for the Carroll thing.
I guess that's just range of motion.
All right, man. Thanks so much for coming on. We'll talk next week, Will.
Yeah, see ya.
The old kick drum like an alley-oop. Drop rhymes like dimes when I drive the hoop. You must tune in if you want the scoop. The Rapcast crew on the ones and twos.
Hey, welcome back to the Raptors Weekly Extra podcast. As promised, we have a guest for the second half this week. We're bringing in Mike Gallagher from Rotoworld to talk about fantasy basketball as it pertains to the Toronto Raptors for the upcoming year. This is about the time you should be doing your draft prep. Mike contributes to Rotoworld regularly, was a big part of the draft guide that they just released, which is linked to in the post for this podcast, so make sure to check that out. Mike, good morning, and thanks so much for coming on.
My pleasure, man. Pumped to talk some basketball and especially some Raptors team that's has some nice value guys early in the draft with Lowry and JV.
Yeah. So I guess let's start there. Let's talk about the Raptors, who you like with their draft stock, who you don't like. I've got a consensus ranking up in front of me as well, so maybe we'll see how your rankings compare on some of these guys. Kyle Lowry, consensus ranking has him going 16th off the board. You think that's a pretty good value for a guy with this many threes, steals, and assists?
In a 9-cat, it's a shade early for me, and we talked about it on our podcast. You're paying for last season with Lowry, who's 30 now. He's coming off a 37-minute per game season. Seems a little lofty to hit that again. And yeah, I mean, he's going to be great. I mean, if he could stay healthy. But I'd rather take him at like 23-ish at the back end of the second versus the middle of the second. So, but in an 8-cat, you really want to make sure you get your point guard. So I'm definitely cool with taking him in mid-second round.
Yeah, he's the 13th ranked player overall last year, which is that's awesome. He was top 10 MVP candidate, top 5 if you look at the advanced stats, and it held for fantasy too. So it's always we'll talk a little bit more later about whether it's okay to draft your own guys as a tiebreaker kind of, but it's always nice when the hometown guy is also contributing to your fantasy team if you were lucky enough to get him. You mentioned JV too. I know he's a guy that we talked a lot about his potential role when I joined you on your podcast the other week, which is also, if you didn't check that, that's linked to in the post for this podcast as well. But JV's a guy you're excited about. He's going, with some qualifiers about his potential role and minutes load, he's going off board around like 53, it looks like. So, mid-5th round, depending on how many teams you have in your league. Is that a value you like for a guy entering his 5th season who's been hyper-efficient when he's gotten the ball?
Absolutely. JV is right up my alley. I always draft guys who have blocking capability, can hit free throws. JV, 77% from the line in his career. His block rate has been a little disappointing. We thought it was going to be on the rise after his 1.3 in his rookie season. But, yeah, I think he could hit 1.5 blocks. We've talked about possibly the minute increase now that the Raptors have some depth issues. They're still trying to figure out the 4. Pirtle's not quite ready yet. Yeah, so this is definitely the, if not now, when kind of a year for JV. And I am frequently pouncing on him in the 4th round, almost at any chance I have.
Yeah, he's a guy last year, even missing 20-plus games, was ranked 74th overall. And then you mentioned the centers who can shoot at that kind of free throw clip. if you can plug him in at the pivot and not sink your rate stats, he shot 76% from the line last year. He's at 77.4% over a 4-year career. And then you mentioned the blocks too. With the exception of his sophomore season, he's been good for over a block a game. Career high 1.3 last year. His rim protection numbers were down some if you're looking at how opponents shot in the restricted area when he was defending. But he was much better in 2014-15. And then the Raptors also tweaked their system to be a little more suited to his style of play. So could you see him pushing 1.5 blocks if the minutes tick up from, say, 26 to 30 and, the rim protection falls somewhere between where it did the last 2 years?
I think so. I mean, yeah, if he gets a good even 10% bump on his minutes, so 26 and add 2.6 minutes, and he's looking, close to 29, he could definitely add, call it 15% bump on his blocks and get to 1.5. Yeah, so I like him a lot, man. And just one of the great floor guys. Does have the health concerns. If you draft guys, like if you draft a Curry or a Durant or guys who have really strong percentages, pairing him with JV is just such a fantastic way to start the first 4 rounds of your draft. And just to add to that, if you draft JV, make sure you're not drafting like DeAndre Jordan, or this is in category style league. So if you're in a points league, it's a little different. And JV doesn't hold as much value in points leagues, to throw that out there. But yeah, a great guy to target.
Do you prefer category leagues over points leagues, eh?
Love categories. Way more strategy involved. Anything with more strategy, sign me up.
So I take it then you're a proponent of auction over snake as well?
Oh, hands down. I love auctions, man. I'm all over the place. We actually did a preview pod if anyone's interested to talk about strategies, and it's just such a feeling out demand. It's just such a cool thing. You kind of feel who's going to get cost a lot, and I love bidding people up, the guys that I don't necessarily need to have. It's a lot of fun. If you've never done an auction, definitely give it a try this season. I've
also found it to just be like a much more fair distribution of talent for fantasy basketball, where it can be a little top heavy sometimes. You got to pay. You can't just get the fortune of landing the number 1 pick. And this year there's a little bit of question as to who the number 1 pick should be. I want to focus mostly Raptors, but number 1 pick, do you have Westbrook at the top of your board?
I actually have Harden by a fairly significant margin.
Okay.
We've seen D'Antoni really talk up more ball handling. Harden, believe it or not, didn't handle the ball. He gets he handles the ball all the time. His time of possession isn't that high, outside the top 10 for everyone in the league per game. And Westbrook was number 2 behind Lillard. So he's going to handle the ball more. He's going to have a faster pace. I think he's going to hit 9.5, 10. I think he's going to be close to 10 assists, and his steals are going to be about the same as Westbrook. I think his field goal percentage would be a little bit better. He's going to help you more from the line because he shoots better from there. Goes to the line a ton. His rebounds are good. Obviously, you hate him for the way he plays defense, but you don't give up fantasy points for allowing guys to go off against you. So Harden's my guy. Westbrook, the only concern I have is he's going to have like a 41-42 usage rate. And the way he plays is just so aggressive. He's going to take so much contact. He's just kind of like the way Dwayne Wade was when he was in his prime. He was just always on the floor, always taking awkward falls. Just scares me for a guy that's going to see that much volume.
But he is also a guy who played with a broken face before, so if any game's meaningful, he'll be out there. Doubling back to JV just for a sec, it's something we touched on a little bit in your podcast, and something that I'm really going to be on the lookout for in the preseason. Not that Dwayne Casey's going to tip his hand rotation-wise a little bit, but the sticking point with Jonas Valanciunas is always that he has this efficient post-game. He's great as a dive man. I think among qualifiers he was like 4th in points per possession on the dive last year, but like 67th in number of touches, and it was the same kind of thing for his post touches in 2014-15. Even though his efficiency regressed a little bit last year, his usage was just barely north of 20% last year. The thing I'm looking for this year, the Raptors are never going to be a team that, as long as they have Lowry and DeRozan, are going to feed a post guy for 25% usage, and the kind of touches that some people would love to see from JV, and his efficiency would go down with that many touches anyway, probably. But the thing I'm looking for from the Raptors this year, not saying it is going to happen, but might happen, is Valanciunas getting an earlier hook in games. Patterson comes in, slides Sullinger to the 5, and then Valanciunas comes back in after to kind of prop up second units. And I think that's a good way to keep the bench scoring high and effective, and a good way to get Valanciunas a few more touches without siphoning anything from Lowry or DeRozan. Is that something you'd look for? Is that something you think would help JV's value if the Raptors come out and play that way?
Definitely. Yeah, like you said, career high, 20.9 usage rate last season. And I think when people get mad at JV as a fantasy asset, it's because he's not playing enough in the second half. So distributing his minutes a little more evenly certainly makes sense. And yeah, he just seems like he's in a great spot, especially like you said, the depth up front does make sense to kind of stagger him a little bit, and that would help his usage rate too, to take him away from the first unit guys a little bit more.
Yeah, I find it curious transitioning to Jared Sullinger. Last year, all year long, Raptor fans banged the drum that Patterson should be starting over Luis Scola. The Raptors lost Luis Scola, signed Jared Sullinger. All indications from media day and even as far back as the day of the signing are that Sullinger's going to start at the 4, even though, defensively, Patrick Patterson is a more natural fit. Offensively, as a low-usage guy who can shoot the 3, Patterson seems like a better fit with the starters too. But the thing to watch out for Sullinger this year, I think, is he only shot 27.6% on threes over his 4 years in Boston at 2 threes a game. Luis Scola was a guy who hadn't shot threes at all, shot a ton from the corners last year with the Raptors. Sullinger didn't shoot from the corners at all, and he told me a funny thing at Media Day on Monday. He said that Nick Nurse, Raptors assistant coach, told him if he doesn't take 4 corner threes per game in the preseason, he's going to get fined. So how much could that change in the type of threes that Jared Sullinger shoots? Do you see a boost to the 3-point percentage there? Do you see that swinging his value at all?
I do, and you kind of you stole my thunder. I was all excited to put a stat out there, but you had it. Yeah, he only took 2 corner threes last season versus 101 above the break, 2 backcourt included in there. So yeah, I could see him bumping up. I mean, this guy, you look at it just stat sheet wise, you're like, all right, 20%, 27%, 28 in his 3-point percentage in his career. So yeah, I could see him. I mean, I like to think that if you hit 33% of your threes, you're looking at about a 50 effective field goal percentage, which is good. So if he can get to that low 30s, he's going to be worthwhile. But yeah, I don't really see him hitting like 1.2 or anything, but his career high is 0.9 with 3.2 attempts per game. So if he gets 4, like you're saying, then yeah, you're looking at about 1 and change, which is really nice. But I don't think he's going to be very good from the field overall. So he's going to hurt you there. And generally, you like your power forwards to be over 45% at least. So I don't see him hitting that. So yeah, he's kind of just a late round sleeper. I probably wouldn't take him in a 12-team standard league. Okay,
because the average rank has him, the consensus I have in front of me, he's at 129, but with a wide range there, anywhere from 107 to 170, and 170 in some formats is undrafted. So you're only taking a flyer on Sullinger in deeper leagues?
There's other guys with higher upsides for me, so yeah, I have quite a list of deeper sleepers that I've been pouncing on, and I haven't drafted Sullinger, and I've probably done like 15 mocks or maybe even more.
Are any of those deeper sleepers you're excited about from the Toronto Raptors?
The only one I've taken, and this is really deep, was Norm. Kind of just doubling, and I actually take DeMarre Carroll when he slides quite a bit.
Yeah, he's got a really wide draft range for him right now.
Yeah, I think he's worth it. I mean, we saw what he did in Atlanta. He was hurt all of last season.
Yeah.
And he's really good for fantasy. Threes and steals, decent rebounder, usually decent from the field. But he was just terrible from the field last year.
Yeah, definitely. And like a lot of, he's such a smart cutter, and then he finished so poorly around the rim that when he got some touches, outside of the normal flow of the Raptors offense where he did some really smart things, they just weren't dropping. So I agree that'll come back up. A little concerning, I guess, that he's not 100% entering training camp, but we're still a month away from the season, and he's probably still going to play 30 minutes a game when he gets out there.
Yeah, and then we talked about in the podcast too some potential 4 minutes at the 4, which would probably help his wide open threes a little bit more. Not having a bigger man against him on the offensive side that should clear him up a little bit.
And that would get Norman Powell more minutes too. And right now it looks like for first swing off the bench, Norman Powell and Terrence Ross are kind of in a competition. I've seen Ross drafted much higher, but overall Ross is only going maybe a round ahead of Powell. I take it Powell's a guy you like better. You won't get the volume of threes, but he does a little bit more of everything else. The second half last year, he averaged 9.6 points, 3.4 rebounds, 1.6 assists, and hit 45.5% of his threes. Obviously, the 45.5% of his threes is not going to pulled up over a larger sample, and he's maybe not going to shoot a ton. But Powell's a draft asset you like a little better for the value more than Terrence Ross?
Yeah, two things I like about him the most is he doubled his shooting percentage post-break versus pre-break from 30. And then the other thing, I love this probably more than anything, is if you're drafting a backup, you want a guy to have multiple avenues to get minutes. And he has probably 4. I mean, obviously, if DeMarre or DeRozan go down, that helps him. But then if Lowry goes down, that's going to bump Joseph more, which takes away the Lowry-Joseph lineup, so that helps him there. And then if Sullinger goes down, that'll bump DeMarre to the 4 a little bit more. So 4 guys, and you could even say JV because they may go with Sullinger more at the 5. So pretty much if any starter gets hurt, it's going to help Norman Powell. So I love that about him especially.
Yeah, okay, so I'm looking at the rankings here. The rankings that I pulled up go 420 players deep. The only Raptor not listed on there, somehow Bruno Caboclo's listed. I think it's just one guy listed his one of the pro rankers ranked down this far. But the only guy not listed is Pascal Siakam, and he's a guy you were curious about the type of minutes he might get, right?
Yeah, shot blocking rate, good for decent free throw shooter. Love that kind of stuff. I know Casey talked him up the other day as a potential starter next season. So yeah, we'll see what happens. Someone just been somewhat durable in his career. Played 81 games last year. He had a down year last 2 seasons ago, but 74 before that. For a guy his size, you think he'd be out a little bit more, but yeah, you're obviously going to be in a super duper deep league to draft him, or even in a deep dynasty. But definitely someone to watch because he has upside.
Yeah, what I want this year is I want to find like a league that goes like 50 rounds deep where you're drafting D-League talent and stuff. I would love to play in a league super deep where you can take a flyer on a Pascal Siakam or a Lucas Nogueira, I guess, if you want to get really weird.
Yeah, I played in a 30-man league and I drafted Nikola Jokic, and that won me the league, the 30-man.
Yeah, that's a big pull. I don't think Lucas Nogueira is going to be this year's Nikola Jokic.
No, I don't think so.
Are there any Raptors we haven't talked about who you have thoughts on, positive or negative from a
Well, we haven't talked about DeRozan, interestingly. I never draft DeRozan, and it's because he doesn't really steal the ball, doesn't block, doesn't really hit threes. He's been better, and we love his durability, we love all those minutes out there, but he's just never really been my cup of tea. In a standard league, in a points league, then yeah, because he's going to score a lot. And that's really all that counts. Not all that counts, but it's a big part of why you draft a guy in points leagues. So, I would rather draft JV over DeRozan, which some people who don't play fantasy may be a little thrown off by that, but it's by a pretty wide margin. So, yeah, just kind of keep an eye on him, and if he slides, take him, but I wouldn't be too aggressive on drafting him.
Yeah, DeRozan, 38th ranked fantasy player last year, and that's with top 10 minutes in the league. So if his role is going to be scaled back. Maybe he comes down a little bit. But like you mentioned, some empty categories there with DeRozan, including three-point shooting. And then from an efficiency perspective, he'll load up your free throws and help your free throw total or your free throw rate. But field goal percentage-wise, he's hardly elite there. So he's going off boards around pick number 43, 44, which is about a full round ahead of Jonas Valanciunas. So if you're looking to grab a Raptor, maybe wait a couple picks and snatch up JV instead, or when they're both there, even depending on how you want to build your team.
That sounds good.
On that note, before I let you go, what is your policy on if someone's sitting there and they're looking at, I don't know, for example, like Kyle Lowry and John Wall are both there, and whatever, say you evaluate them and they're completely equal fantasy assets or close enough to it, are you on board with draft your own guy, the team you cheer for, just so you have a little extra rooting interest? What's your stance on homerism?
None. I take my heart completely out of it. For an example, I play in 12 fantasy football leagues, and I'm a diehard Jets fan, and I have drafted in all those 12 leagues and all those picks, I only made one Jets pick. And that was Bilal Powell at an auction for dirt cheap, and I wasn't even really bidding on him, but I kind of got him. So I kind of take my heart out of it. I don't know. It's just if you really just watch the Raptors, I could see it. But I just watch so many different guys that I don't care. And then one thing that I thought you were taking me to is, and I'll just add, is like risk management, where you talked about Lowry and Wall. Wall has a way higher risk because of the knee, so you want to go a little bit safer earlier. But just say hypothetically there are two guys, like say even a Joel Embiid versus a guy like Mozgov, who is going to get minutes and all that. I would take Embiid because he has a higher upside. So safe early, gamble late is kind of a way I live my fantasy life, I guess.
Yeah, I agree with that too. And from the tie-breaking perspective, I almost sometimes go the other way, where it's like, look, if say Lowry were to get hurt or DeRozan were to get hurt, if I'm a fan and then also own them for fantasy, I don't want that double hit. I mean, I try to take my heart out of it, but I'd almost skew away from Raptors just to try to manage my own personal sanity if things were to go wrong. And hey, look, it works out to avoid your own guys because you didn't end up getting stuck with Brian Fitzpatrick's minus 14-point week last week. Or
Yeah, the old 8 turnover game, 6 picks, man. Oh God. And Eric Decker's hurt, by the way, so he may be out for a little bit. If you're listening and play fantasy football, make sure Quincy Enunwa is owned.
If you're listening to play fantasy sports of any kind, you should be following Mike. You should get that Rotoworld draft guide. Draft guide's only what, $20?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's a little bonus too if you get like the season pass. We do from going forward ranks. I do a column called Pickups of the Day, where every single day except Sunday, I talk about the top 5 or 6 pickups from the day. It's pretty cool if you're really hardcore into it. And if you're spending $100, $200, even $50 in your season, and you want to win it, what's another $20? So it's pretty cool.
It's a good investment. And Raptors Republic listeners, at some point during the preseason, we'll put together another Raptors Republic fantasy league. It's tough because the spots fill up so quickly that last year everyone was mostly just more mad at me that there weren't enough spots than happy that we had a league. But look for that in the coming weeks. Mike, anything else you wanted to plug before we let you get out of here?
No, I could throw some boom guys that I like if you want me to throw some quick.
Yeah.
The guy I love Giannis Antetokounmpo. He goes first round. Jokic, Miles Turner, those guys I wind up a lot in the first 4 rounds. Then I think probably the breakout pick of the year is going to be D'Angelo Russell. Just his ceiling is so high. I think he's just a great guy to take. And then late wise, I'm drafting a lot of Seth Curry late. The Nuggets. I can't even talk. The Mavericks are really talking him up. Trey Lyles, Courtney Lee's a great high floor guy. I definitely want to get my hands on either Dario Saric or Embiid, like I said. Terrence Jones, Chris Dunn, Robert Covington's a good guy late. So those are just some. Mirza Teletovic too. If they miss threes, they're going to need him big time with Chris Middleton out. And with the way they run their lineups out there, we'll see. I see Mirza getting minutes in the upper 20s.
Terrence Jones is an interesting call. A lot of Raptors fans wanted the Raptors to make a play for him. When he landed really cheap with New Orleans, it's been reported before that there are some non-basketball things that I guess were flags for Terrence Jones in the past. I think Josh Lewenberg of TSN reported that around the deadline last year. But from a fantasy aspect, you don't have to worry about that. And Jones seems like such a good bounce-back value at like almost no cost at all.
Yeah, he goes in the last 3 or 4 rounds. And even like competitive leagues, he goes after 120 pretty much every time, which is great. I mean, he's such a perfect fit for Gentry, so he's definitely a great bounce back candidate, possibly comeback play of the year kind of candidate. He got really put in the doghouse hard last year. So we'll see what he does.
Yeah. Okay. So everyone check out the Rotoworld draft guide. You can check out Mike at at Mike S. Gallagher on Twitter. That'll be linked in the podcast post as well, as will the Rotoworld draft preview and the podcast Mike and I did the other week. Mike, thanks so much for coming on, man. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Anytime.
Hit the old kick drum like an alley-oop. Drop rhymes like dimes when I drive the hoop. Y'all must tune in if you want